Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod here to talk about Michigan State's opener as the season is actually going to start finally against Colgate at the Breslin Center on November 3rd on Monday at 7 p.m. Just as a reminder, please join the Beat Rod contest. It costs nothing. It's a 1 through 18 final standings of the Big Ten. Send them in to me, Eric, at tffinots.com. We've had a number of entries already. Also, that reminds me, Spencer Tanky, thank you for your generous donation via Venmo. If you want to support the show, you can head on over to our support page at tffinots.com/support. You get the necessary links to join either as a regular supporter on Patreon or Substack, or a one-time donation via PayPal or Venmo. If you are a regular contributor to the show, you will get an ad-free version if you want. That'll come through your email, and sometimes it's early, and sometimes it's a bit later. It's not like on time with when the show is released. So just kind of look for that. Again, that's at our support page. And we've had entries already to the Beat Rod contest. Again, 1 through 18. You have to have the tiebreaker as how many points Michigan State scores. Someone actually asked if it was okay to use AI. And so he used AI to make his picks. Not sure if that's going to help, but certainly whatever you want to do to try and predict the future, I think it's all on the, it's all fair game. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Just to finish your thought there, the tiebreaker is you have to pick the total number of points Michigan State scores against Michigan, right?
Thank you. Yes, not scores in the season.
Both games combined, right?
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And if you want to use AI, I guess the only thing that would be out of bounds is if somehow you go Back to the Future and get the actual betting book.
You got a time machine. All's fair.
In which case, kudos to you, and you can have the nudge printing gift card. If you do all that work for $100 gift card, I guess
Yeah.
That's if that's all you did.
To it. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose. Right. So Michigan State, of course, will start off the season at the Breslin Center. They host the Raiders from Colgate, and the Raiders have actually been pretty good. I feel like Michigan State has not done a good job in the sense of picking a bunch of patsies to open up the season.
Yeah.
Not that this is a great team. Like they're not, they're not playing Kentucky, but it is important to note they're not just playing schmucks that are sub 350 teams in the D1. And they've given themselves a challenge. The Raiders are on the Patriot League, of course. Last season, they weren't that great. They were 14-19, but the year before that, they were 25-10. The year before that, they're 26-9. Then they were 23-12. And so they have had a number of Patriot League titles, a lot of NCAA bids. I don't know if they've won any NCAA games because I think
they haven't.
Being the Patriot League, because of the weird thing with the NCAA tournament now, they're not the 16 seeds, so they are like a 15, I suppose, or they're high 16. So they're never playing in those play-in games in Dayton. So they don't get any NCAA tournament victories that way, which is always kind of a weird thing that these 16 seeds get some wins.
And they haven't come particularly close to winning a game. But look, Matt Langel, and I have seen people suggest that maybe he missed his window because they were disappointing last year. I tend to think that's probably not true. Mm-hmm. This guy has had a remarkable run. He's been there for 14 seasons.
14 years,
okay?
Yeah.
And so his overall winning percentage is 54%. In league play, that jumps to 63%. But think about this. Over the last 8 seasons, so from roughly the midway point of his tenure on, he's 170-86 overall and 109-29 in Patriot League games with 5 NCAA tournament bids. That is remarkable. When you are in a one-bid league, which the Patriot League assuredly is, and you get to the NCAA tournament with that kind of regularity, you know what you're doing. And he has been a hot name at different points, just has never taken the jump. He's very much a product of kind of what Colgate is, an East Coast mid-major program, because he played college basketball at Pennsylvania. So his whole background is from that. And I think that that's part of it, that it seems very likely to me that if and when he makes a jump, it's going to be in that part of the country.
Sure.
And so that limits, he's not necessarily seen as a guy who could go anywhere, but really remarkable stuff that he's done at Colgate. They've won in different ways over time. When you look at their profile, there have been stark differences from year to year among his championship teams. But generally, there are some generalities that you can apply that should help us in terms of what we should expect to see on Monday night. Their offense has been top 100 in efficiency most of those years. I'm talking over the last 8. And if you're in the top 100 in anything as a mid-major, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Because again, that stuff gets influenced by the caliber of opponents you're playing, blah, blah, blah. That's why we say that a Big Ten team that's outside of the top 100 on defense or even overall is really not good.
Right.
Because it's weighted in such a way that it plays to the high majors' strengths, right? Or it helps them grade out well.
Yeah, right.
Colgate, a program like Colgate doesn't get that benefit, and yet he's had a number of top 100 offenses. They've usually been slightly slower paced than average, but this isn't going to be like a Princeton type thing. They'll play, and they emphasize good defensive rebounding while they've never done anything on the offensive end. Again, not a surprise for this kind of program. Likely over the years, Colgate has not had a huge amount of size. They don't necessarily have great athletes. So programs that fit that profile, it makes sense. You emphasize getting back. You're not sending 4 to the boards on offense. And you also, in turn, emphasize clearing your defensive glass when there's a missed shot by your opponent. And they've done that generally very well.
Right.
They've usually done a pretty good job of avoiding turnovers. So the last couple of years, they've been middle of the pack nationally. So say the 170, 180 type range. They are picked 3rd in the preseason this year in the Patriot behind Navy and Boston U. The other thing that's interesting, and I almost wonder if it's part of the motivation for scheduling this game. This is a program that is very much after Tom Izzo's heart. And for a mid-major especially, this is remarkable. 1 portal addition this year. 1.
Yeah. That's amazing for mid-majors.
Yeah. Everybody else. Right. Because it tells you 2 things. Yeah, you're not adding guys to the portal. You're also not losing very many guys in the portal.
Yeah.
So you got to give Langel a tremendous amount of credit for that. He obviously knows what he's doing in terms of retention. And also willingness. He's got 4 high school freshmen this year, freshmen from high school, I should say.
Yeah.
That is something, we're not seeing that in the Big Ten very often. So hats off to him. He's running his program in a way that's against the grain, but he's also had a lot of success with it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about the, and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit, rebounding, but when you have a team that defensive rebounds so well, despite having a lack of athletes, it actually is probably helpful in them in some respects because you're probably not attempting blocks and things like that. So probably
that's right.
When you're going for blocks, it's a lot of weak side blocks, and then it leaves you vulnerable on the back side, the weak side, right, for offensive rebounding. You see that all the time.
It's just sound, and that was how Tom Izzo's teams played for a long time until the freedom of movement stuff came in, and it just made it too difficult to check guys consistently on the perimeter. And so you were going to have more activity at the rim, and he adjusted. And, Michigan State the last 8-9 years has typically been a very good shot blocking team. Right. But he never used to emphasize it for that reason. The belief was you just take too many gambles. You put yourself out of position on the defensive glass. You open up easy second chances for opponents. Again, that's had to go kind of by the boards, but programs like Colgate, they're not interested in trying to contest you at the rim so much. They're going to play sound defensive principles and emphasize clearing the glass once you miss a shot.
Yeah. So aside from making the obvious Colgate jokes about toothpaste, I actually have a Colgate story, which is interesting.
Okay.
So Colgate, of course, is in central New York. It's sort of like around kind of where it's a little bit around Syracuse, not exactly Syracuse, but it kind of I can't remember exactly where it is, Highbury or something like that in New York. Mm-hmm. We were out interviewing for residencies. And so my wife, as everyone knows, who listens to the show, is from Iowa. I was coming from Iowa, and in the interview trail for residencies, you'll meet people from all over, of course. And I think we were in Pittsburgh and interviewing for residency. My wife was in, and it was just she and another young woman, and that was a woman who went to Colgate for undergraduate, and I think she was out somewhere out east for her medical school training. So they were interviewing for pediatric residency. And at some point, the girl turned to my wife and said, "Oh, well, I don't know what you guys do out on the West Coast, but here," and starts talking about something. And my wife's sort of like, "What?" Like looking over her shoulder, like I think I'm the only one in the room. I'm from Iowa. I can't be any farther from a coast. But this young woman had no idea where Iowa was. Like she just, and presumably she's very smart. But as many people from like the New York area and stuff, they really have no concept like Iowa, Idaho, Ohio. They're all kind of the same.
I don't
So
I don't know if you've ever seen. I've seen different versions over the years, but I believe it originated in the New Yorker. Somebody did the New Yorker is well known for their cartoons, and they had a map of the United States to people who live on the East Coast, and it was the East Coast, New York, Philadelphia, Boston, all of that. Then just a tiny area of nothing, and then California.
Yeah, right. Pretty much. Chicago, somewhere in there. Not sure where.
There's a term for it: flyover country.
Flyover, yes, for sure.
That's where America is. Anyway.
Yeah, that, and I made the mistake when I was interviewing in Rochester, New York, which I don't know if you've been there, but it feels. It does not feel like New York, like New York City, and
it feels like the Upper Midwest.
There's your mistake, because I said the same thing. I said this kind of feels like this is just where like everyone's kind of like the Midwest, and they were really offended by that comment.
But we are not
Midwest.
But it's true.
Yeah,
it's true. Those areas, because they're industrialized cities, or they were. They share much more in common with places like Flint than they do New York City. Absolutely.
Yeah, and they certainly don't have the accent too that the New Yorkers have. All right. Well, let's move on and start talking about the Raiders and the opposing lineup, which is brought to you by the Rochester Gutters. So just like those in New York, they don't have the opportunity to have Greg and Kurt take care of their gutters as you do here in the state of Michigan. So make sure you contact them, reach out to them. They can take care of things, not only just clean them out, they can put leaf guards on so you don't have to clean them out anymore. They can replace things, they repair things, whether it's your home, whether it's your business, whatever it might be. The Brothers Adjust Your Gutters will take care of things, and they sponsor the player that Michigan State needs to keep in the gutter. You can get a hold of Kurt and his teammate Greg on our website at the support page at tffinots.com/support. Be sure once you reach out to your estimate, just mention Final Four to get 10% off for your gutter work. All right, so we'll begin with the starters, or expected starters. Jalen Cox, 6'3" junior from Los Angeles, preseason all Patriot choice, averaged almost 12 points a game last year, which was second, and shot 50, 29, and 78. Also led the team in assists with 4 a game, but also 3 turnovers a game, so not a great number, I guess, as a point guard.
Yeah, again, preseason first team all league choice, proven producer, not the most efficient. I mentioned, their efficiency in terms of turnover limitation was down from recent historical levels last couple of years, and Cox was a reflection of that. But he's their go-to guy coming into the season. Returning starter, has logged a lot of minutes, even in a brief 2-year career, and he's the guy. So I would imagine that he will probably draw Jeremy Fears to start with. That would be my assumption. So he's the guy. If you're looking for one player to focus on as their offensive focal point, he's the one.
Real interesting finding a kid from Los Angeles who ends up in
They've got a
New York.
few. They've got multiple guys from California. Yeah, I noticed that too. Yeah,
so the next guy, not from California, Ben Tweedy, whose name sounds like he can be the only place he could be from is Australia. 6'4" sophomore, and he's the only transfer that came into Colgate this year. Started 9 games last year at Green Bay as a freshman, where he averaged 5.3 points a game, 2.2 assists, and shot 42, 22, and 82.
Now, it should be noted, the rest of the starters, the other 4 guys, I feel pretty confident in. This one, I don't know.
Right.
Colgate, at least I could not find any information on scrimmages that they played, and couldn't really get a read So this is going to be a broad list of players on this roster, and it's hard to know. As I say, the other 4 starters I feel pretty good about because 3 of them are returning starters, and the other one is an obvious guy to move up. Tweedy is a guess just because he's played a year of college basketball at a similar level program and started several games as a freshman. But obviously, they're going to want better shooting than 22% from 3 from a wing.
Next will be Brady Cummins, 6'6" senior, where he averaged 8.2 points a game, 2.8 rebounds a game in 25 minutes last year. Starting, we shot 44, 35, and 65.
And Cummins is not only a returning starter and a guy who's had some production under his belt for them, but is seen as a leader. And it shouldn't be surprising given what I talked about in terms of their retention. They're not going into the portal, all of that. This is a program that from what I gathered really has tended to operate in the traditional mode, the way Michigan State operates, where guys grow into roles over time. And then when you've got seniors, you look to them to be leaders. And I've seen stuff that Cummins and another one of his teammates, the other senior in the rotation, is a guy named Kyle Carlissimo, who will play off the bench for them. They are seen as the leaders of this team.
Next, we have Parker Jones, a 6'7" junior, also a returning starter. He averaged 8.3 points a game, 4.6 rebounds a game, shot 41, 37, and 81.
Yeah, and he's the guy, if you're identifying one player to watch out for in particular from 3, he would be the guy. 37% is a decent number, and he's by far the leader in made threes among guys that came back. He was second on the team last year, but he's by far the top guy who's coming back. Average better than 3 makes a game. So he takes a lot of threes. Also, obviously, 4.6 boards, their top returning rebounder.
Yeah.
So they'll ask a lot from him.
And finally, at the 5, Sam Wright, 6'9", 235-pound junior. He averaged 5.7 points a game last year, along with 2.8 rebounds. Played only 14 minutes. Started 8, so this would be more of a consistent start if this is sort of his role going forward. Yeah. Last season, he shot 50, 36, and 73.
Yeah, so that number tells you that will be the dangerous part of dealing with him, is that he seems likely to be a guy that they'll ask to do some stuff on the perimeter as well as inside. So Carson Cooper, Jackson Kohler, Jesse McCullough, they're going to have to be aware of him as a legitimate shooting threat. He's the obvious choice. You know, he played a lot as a reserve last year, and as you said, started 8 games. None of their other returning big men were close to that in terms of their roles. So I have to believe that Wright is likely to be the guy, unless they were to decide to go big and play him at the 4. But for my purposes, I'm assuming he's going to be the 5 man.
A lot of versatility in the big men there. And I think it'll be a challenge, you know, from a defensive standpoint, which we'll talk about later for Michigan State.
There's good, you know, the thing is they're not a team, obviously, that starting lineup. You don't have the aircraft carrier type, the 7-footer, any of that. But there's good, you know, 6'3", 6'4", 6'6", 6'7", 6'9". That's decent. That's decent positional size across the board.
And then the reserves will go through. And the first one you mentioned briefly is Kyle Carlissimo. I assume no relation to PJ Carlissimo.
I looked into it. I don't think so, but I'm not. I could be wrong.
Yeah, it could be a grandkid or something like that, right? 6'2" senior, averaged 4.3 points a game, shot 43, 37, and 40, and most of his attempts were outside the arc.
Yeah, 80% of them. So Carlissimo, definitely a guy, and I mentioned he's a senior. He's seen as a leader. I think he's going to play a lot off their bench, and definitely a 3-point threat.
Then we have Blake Forrest, 5'11" sophomore. He averaged a little under 2 points a game, played only 9 minutes a game last season, about 21 games. He shot 32, 25, and 88 last year as a freshman.
And from here on out, I'm just going to offer this. It's impossible to know who's going to end up in the rotation. Colgate's not going to play 13 guys. But once you get past Carlissimo, you're talking about guys that Forrest to be the first of many who didn't play a lot last year. And then you've got 4 freshmen. So how that's going to sort out, I just don't have any indication. So we're mentioning them all.
Yeah, I mean, the assumption, of course, is, well, not assumption, but the reality is they had exhibitions, but they were probably closed, like Michigan State used to be, because no one is paying $5 or $8 to go watch a game against with Colgate versus someone else, and so it's largely the black box here they're going up against. Next, we'll talk about Josh Ahayer, 6'3" sophomore, averaged 1.8 points a game, shot 26, 36, and 77, playing about 8 minutes a game.
Yep, another candidate for a rotation role off the bench, but I think that, I think Colgate is likely to play their starters a lot.
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's going to be huge roles, but Ahayer would definitely be a candidate for minutes. He shot well from three in limited attempts.
Well, it'll be interesting too, of course, that it's a little tough to shorten your bench against Michigan State usually, unless you really intentionally play slow. So,
and historically they have not been a team that slows it down.
Right.
Maybe they will be against MSU, but historically they haven't been.
Next, we have Cameron Brennan, 7-footer. I imagine you'd see a 7-footer just because of there's a good chance to see him play with some size.
Yeah.
He averaged 1.5 points a game, 1.8 rebounds a game, played about 8 minutes a game last season, played about half the games, it looks like.
I would imagine that Brennan is set to see a bigger role. You can't teach 7 feet, as they say. And that would be the one wild card, is if they decided to go with him and slide right to the 4, then move Jones to the 3, Cummins to the 2. That's conceivable, but I'm assuming he's going to come off the bench. And yeah, with that kind of size, he would have a great chance to be in the rotation somewhere.
Next, you have Jonathan Niv, 6'5" freshman. And so here we're getting to the 4 freshmen that they've got brought in.
Yeah, good size for the wing. He's seen as a shooter. And again, it's impossible to tell, but I don't rule out any of these freshmen actually leapfrogging guys that are a little older than them to get some minutes. So it's possible.
Next is Charlie Pugh, 6'4" freshman. Dad played at Kansas, and he's more of a perimeter player too.
Yeah, again, another candidate for minutes. It's just impossible for me to tell at this stage who's likely to win out.
And then we get to some size here. We have Andrew Alexeyenko, 6'8", 230-pound freshman.
Yeah, and there were some positive things said about him by Langel when he announced their class. Good size, obviously, at 6'8", 230. And they really like not just his size, but the fact that he plays physically. He knows how to use his size. So would not be surprising to see he or the next guy actually emerge as rotation players in the post.
Right. Yeah, the next one is 6'10", 220-pound freshman, Ayomi Odetoyimbo.
Yep.
Should have practiced that one before we started.
No, you got through it. So yeah, 6'10", 220. I think the question with him seems to be, is he going to be strong enough to let his length and athleticism play? Obviously, the kind of player that they're bullish on in terms of his future, because they don't typically have guys 6'10" with athletic ability.
Right.
But is he strong enough to let all that impact games right now? We'll see.
All right. So then who do you have as the player Michigan State needs to keep in the gutter?
Well, I think the obvious choice is Cox. You go with the guy who's done it, is a preseason first-team All-League choice. Pretty clear.
And then moving on, we're going to go to the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. Who cleans the glass best? The Squeegee Squad should be the first call you make if you need your windows cleaned or your house washed. They do that as well. Or your business or your high-rise, whatever it might have. As long as you got windows, they can take care of it. They even cleaned the windows of the state capitol. So not only do they stick around Grand Rapids, but they obviously go outside the area too, since they've been all the way to Lansing. So if you're looking for that service for your home before winter comes, make sure you contact the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids first. The nice thing is that added benefit to listen to this show, you get 15% off by just mentioning Final Four when you get your estimate. You can find a way to contact Troy and his team at our support page. The Final Four is on the schedule.com/support. Check them out today. Great pricing, great people. They do fantastic work. Whatever you need done, they can take care of it. All right, so we'll continue our snake draft from last year since it got a little boring with Jackson Kohler. And this is the first. Now it's for real. We've entered into the real stuff. So I'm going to start with Kohler, which is the obvious choice.
Yeah, it's a shock. I'm going to go with Carson Cooper, and then my second choice, I'm betting on a big rebound, pun definitely intended, from Cohen Carr.
Yeah.
I think that Tom Izzo spent a lot of time coming out of the UConn game talking about how Cohen only getting 2 rebounds was not acceptable. So I'm going to, and I'm sure Cohen knows that. So I'm going to bet that he's focused on that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. I think that is the best combination. So this is the wild card. Who is the fourth? And I think it's going to come down to who gets minutes.
Yep.
That may depend a lot on what's the score, right? If the score is close all the way tight to the end.
Yeah. And then, you always have the wild card aspect of do any of your guards end up having big rebounding games just because of a lot of long rebounds or whatever it is.
Absolutely. Yeah, this could be anyone. I'll just go with Ward because I don't think we really know what the rotation's going to be like yet. I don't think we're going to know probably for a month.
Talked, that's true, but we talked about the fact that I think one conclusion we can draw that's at least true right now is that Ward is ahead of McCullough in the rotation.
Yeah.
So if you're going to bet on one of those 2 big guys off the bench being you're getting a lot of minutes, getting more minutes than the other, you would bet Ward right now. So I think that's the right choice.
Yeah, I think so. I think, and as you mentioned, the wild card is you could even see a wild wing pull it down 4 rebounds or something like that, and just randomly.
Trey Fort, Curtain, just the ball bounces their way.
Jordan Scott too. I mean, I think that's possible as well. So, all right. So then moving on to our last part of the show, there's 5 keys to the game brought to you by Nudge Printing. I mentioned already that the prizes for our Beat Rod contest, and also at the end of the season, we also have our NCAA tournament pick contest that is also through Nudge Printing. And why? Because they have fantastic stuff. I mean, I'm wearing a quarter zip, super comfortable, just to hang out around the house or whatever. This is a logoed one. You can find this at our support page. You can find a link to the actual page at Nudge Printing, which has their sponsors, various gear, if you like our logo, or you can just the regular Spartan stuff, which they've got fantastic and just so much stuff. Again, the problem, of course, is that you start accumulating it because it lasts a long time. It looks good for a long time. It can go sustain tons and tons of washing. I think I've washed this like 20 times and it looks just like new. And so it's a high quality screen printing, which is nice, aside from the fact that it's really high quality garments too. So check out Nudge Printing, and you go, of course, to nudgeprinting.com. Type in Final Four as one word at checkout. That way you can get 20% off your order, and do it today. You'll be glad you did. You can get not only basketball stuff, but anything else you want: hockey, golf, football, whatever it is. All right. So first key to the game is the boards. Obviously, Michigan State has not looked good on the boards for, we'll say, 1.5 games.
Yep.
Not really good during the Bowling
more
Green game.
Than that, actually.
Yeah, probably. It took probably the second half of the second half against
That's
UConn
right.
until he really woke up.
Right.
And that was largely because just Kohler just decided he's just going to go get him. And that's
that was part of it. But I actually thought you saw Scott, you saw some other guys too. MSU's overall energy and physicality levels went up. Jackson was the leader for sure, but he wasn't.
I think he got him rolling, but yeah, right.
Yes.
And so this is a team that you look at when we talked about them. They're not an offensive rebounding team. We have seen this so many times over the last few years. We have a team that comes in that's not a good offensive rebounding team, and they just manage to get, 8 offensive rebounds or something like that against Michigan State early in the season. So we don't want to see that for sure, if anything.
I would say this with the program traits, the fact that this isn't there's decent positional size here, but they're not huge, and they don't have any proven great individual rebounders. Anything less than a 70% defensive rebounding rate for MSU would be a major negative, in my opinion. You're right. Occasionally weird things happen in these kind of matchups, but there's no excuse for it. That Michigan State should dominate the defensive glass. The other end will be a challenge because Colgate traditionally has proven to be a good defensive rebounding team. Can Michigan State carve out some second chances on their offensive end? I would suspect they can, but we need to see it. And by the way, that is one thing. The UConn game, Michigan State had nearly a 50% offensive rebounding rate. So
Yeah.
they did get work done on their offensive end. It's just the defensive end was such a struggle for most of the game. So I think there are opportunities here. Michigan State should come out of this with a decided advantage on the glass, but you got to actually do it. No time like the present after two mostly disappointing efforts to reestablish that as a staple for this team going forward.
Yeah, and again, I think one of the things that Michigan State that makes you vulnerable is just going for blocks, and I think that the weak side blocks, and I think they have to be very careful with that because that's the one point where you could imagine Colgate sticking around, and if your guy releases off of you, you're going to say, "Well, I don't need to head back. I can see what happens after the shot." Right?
And so you get some cheap ones because MSU takes themselves out of position. But that's why this stuff is all interrelated. What leads to guys taking chances on weak side blocks? Usually it's a breakdown in perimeter defense. Mm-hmm. Somebody penetrates and forces someone to try to protect the rim. They take themselves out of position. Offense gets an easy putback chance. So it's all interrelated.
Yeah. All right. So the second key to the game is the free throw line. This was a huge strength of Michigan State last year. Not only did they get there a ton last year, but I think they were top 5 at the end of the season, or at least
they were second in the league behind Wisconsin. I remember Wisconsin had just a freakishly good percentage, but MSU was right there.
I think they were. I think Wisconsin
mid to high 70s, maybe as a team. Yeah,
they were 80% for quite a bit of the season.
That's right.
Backed off a little bit at the end. Not been good the first exhibition games. Now their exhibition, they didn't count for anything, so we're starting with a clean slate right now. But we've got to see players who were shooting really well. We had Cone Carr, who is 75% probably shooter at the end of the season. He's really struggled to the line the first 2 games. You had Carson Cooper's looked pretty good, I think. Kohler's looked okay. I think the wings you'd expect better from Tang and Fort, and they have not looked good at the line. So anyway, just something they've got to be more focused at. I don't know.
Izzo says that they've shot it incredibly well in practice. He's been very surprised to see it. Look, they've done a great job getting to the line in these 2 exhibition games. So they're getting the chances. They're doing the things in terms of being forceful and aggressive on offense to draw fouls to get the opportunities. They just haven't cashed in enough of them. I'm not worried at this stage, but you do want to start things out the right way. It would be nice to see MSU have a nice, solid, even like a 75% effort as a team would be good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you want, obviously, free throws are, for most players, it's mostly mental, right? And so it's like, if you get into a good run, I think it was what happened last year. They were kind of pretty hot right out of the gate, and they just stay that way all season. But I think you can get, I don't remember this year with Trice. I think that was maybe a senior year. They just couldn't. They were shooting like 10% worse at the Breslin than they were on the road. It was just a weird sort of thing that they, like the entire crowd, was gasping every time there's a free throw. The players feel that too.
That's a real thing. That's a real thing. When it's great to have big crowds that are into it, and all of that, the home court advantage. But free throw shooting is definitely one of those things. It's like any kind of rhythm-based activity where there's also a heavy mental component, in part because you have that pause in the action.
Right.
It's not something that happens in flow. So compare it to like a field goal kicker, or sometimes a hitter in baseball, or a golfer, any of those activities where there's that moment of silence and you can feel a crowd's anxiety if things aren't going well. So I do believe that can be a factor if things don't go well from the outset, and then the crowd starts to feel like, oh God, here we go again.
Oh yeah.
That's a feeling. It's in the air.
Yeah, you can hear the groans when they misses.
Yeah.
I've always been puzzled because, with free throws, everyone's really quiet, they have the fingers up, but I think that's very strange. I would think that actually make it harder to hit free throws at home, but because I don't think you need to, I don't think the noise really bothers players when they're shooting. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't think it's not like you're calling out plays like it, in football or something.
Yeah,
Where
it's just a traditional, that's how it's approached, not providing distractions. But I think certainly with some players, I suspect you're right. There have to. I'm positive there are guys who prefer it to just seem normal,
yeah,
as
right.
opposed to abnormal, which silence is abnormal.
I mean, could you imagine? Because you don't do that for field goal kickers either. You don't have like totally quiet stadium. I think that'd be very weird. But all right, so next key to the game is the transition game. Obviously, is a big staple for Michigan State. Jeremy Fears is there. They get lots of easy buckets. They're one of the best teams in the country last year in scoring on transition, and they've looked pretty good this year. Through the first two exhibition games, struggled a little bit, I guess, in Connecticut, but that was, I think, at least in part due to the way the game was being called and just the tremendous amount of fouls. It was hard to get any sort of flow.
That and the rebounding. Izzo talked about it.
Right.
He wasn't happy with the running game against UConn. It wasn't a disaster, but he made the point, like, look, if you're not guarding well and you're not rebounding well, hard to run. And that's true. And I think that plus the disjointed nature of the game, as you mentioned, kind of made it choppy and tough to get a consistent running game going. But look, even though Colgate's not a team that traditionally focuses on slowing pace, you can expect that they're going to have had it drilled into them. You got to get back.
Right.
But every team gets that drilled into them. and the fact is, frequently at this time of year, we see teams that are not used to playing MSU really struggle with that. It's a different thing when you've got it coming at you live and in the flesh. And so I would expect there will be opportunities, unless Colgate's really, really well disciplined in that regard, and maybe they will be, but I've just seen enough teams that are one-off games, don't typically see Michigan State the way Big Ten opponents do, for example, really struggle with it. And it's because it's unlike anything, basically it's Michigan State and Carolina. Those are the two teams that play the way that Michigan State does in terms of the transition game. And if you don't see that with regularity, I think it can be very difficult to really fully understand what you're in for. So we want to see Michigan State being aggressive. The big thing that I'm watching in regard to the transition game that I'm interested in is, what does Michigan State look like in that regard when Jeremy Fears is off the floor? I know what they're going to look like when he's on the floor because he looks to push all the time. But can Divine Ugochukwu do that consistently? How does the rest of the team function in transition when Jeremy is not on the floor? That's something I'm going to be watching. Because that was a great strength of last year's team. I could say, well, MSU was better in transition when Jeremy was at the point as opposed to Trey Holloman, and that's true. But they were still pretty good by most team standards with Trey Holloman. I didn't feel like Michigan State's running game just went totally off the table when Jeremy was off the floor. That needs to be the case this year as well. So that's something I'm watching. I think early signs are encouraging, but it's a process. Jim Comparoni always talks about, not just in the running game, but in a number of different areas, defensively, et cetera, guys who are new to the program needing to be programmed or reprogrammed to play the way Tom Izzo wants them to play. That's something I'm watching for. I think Ugochukwu will get there. His physical tools, no reason in the world he shouldn't be able to be a very good transition point guard for MSU, but he's new to the program, and he played in a very different system last year. So how quickly do you feel like, all right, he fully gets it, rather than, well, he's 75% of the way there. That's what I'm watching.
And the fourth key to the game is jump shooting. So we always talk about how the 3-point shot, and this, I think largely what you're getting at here, is not critical to the point where like it's, like it was, most of the shots are from 3 or something like that, or 50% of the shots. So whether you're hitting 35% or 28%, it's not going to probably completely affect the outcome of the game in most games. But this team has really struggled out of the gate, especially the last few years, and it's carried over for a long time. Much like free throws I was talking about, free throws, you can get it where you get rolling early and just kind of stays that way. 3-point shooting has really been a struggle the last 2 years. And I think no matter how many times Izzo says they're shooting really well in practice, we've seen really kind of bust starts for the season. So I think it's got to change, right?
Yeah, I think for on a team level, that's true. I also think some individuals, Tang being the obvious guy because
Right.
he's the guy with the shooter's reputation coming out of high school. He's the guy that Izzo has said is their best pure shooter. And he has not looked good in the 2 exhibition games. It would be one thing, like last year, I felt like some guy like Jaden Akins, I felt at times was snake bit. Like he'd have a good shot, he'd just go in and out, it just wouldn't drop. Curtain, the shot has not been particularly close most of the time on his misses. So I think it's really important for him as an individual to get some confidence built by seeing some shots drop. And then as a team, too, you're right. It can snowball on you pretty quickly if it's not going. Again, we talk about that crowd. You can feel it, right? It's palpable.
Oh, yeah.
When a guy goes up for a 3, you're like, oh, boy, and you just, that gets transmitted. I don't blame the fans. It's a natural reaction. It's impossible to completely stifle, but they need to build some confidence. Kerr would be where I start, but honestly, it's important that Trey Fort get confidence going. It's important that Jackson Kohler see some go down. Jeremy Fears. These are all guys that are Colin Carr. These are all guys that are going to have to contribute. But Kerr is the first one that comes to mind because it's a purported strength of his. It's something I think MSU needs from him. And he's struggled early on.
Well, and it's certainly for him, it's probably the most important thing for him is seeing minutes on the floor, right? If he doesn't do
Absolutely. As we talked about it, I think he will get better. I expect him to get better in terms of the other things, hustle plays, defense. I certainly hope so. But where he's been at right now, if he's playing that way and he's not hitting threes, he's not giving you anything.
Yeah.
So he needs to hit some shots.
And finally, the fifth key to the game is the perimeter defense. We talked about Colgate. They've got a lot of players. I mean, fortunately, Michigan State doesn't play drop coverage with their bigs because the bigs for Colgate contribute significantly to the 3-point shooting for their team.
Yeah, Colgate, it's 2 things here. First, we talk about the 3-point line. Colgate doesn't bring back like a ton of high-level proven shooting, but you just never know in a game like this. And as you say, they've got some guys who are likely to play significant minutes who have some versatility to them. So Jackson Kohler, Carson Cooper, those guys are going to need to be aware. MSU, and it's not a surprise, given where we are in the season and the number of new players in the rotation, they're not anywhere close to like a mid-season level of connectedness. You see it, particularly on the perimeter. You see it. And that's where in terms of dribble penetration containment, that's very important. You can't have opposition guards breaking you down over and over because, as we talked about earlier, it's not just about what that guard might be able to do himself going to the rim, but what happens even if he misses a shot, but the way it's forced your defense to adjust and the other holes that opens up for second chance baskets, for example. You want to see Michigan State doing a better job in terms of in that area, in keeping perimeter guys on the perimeter, squaring them up, not allowing a lot of blow-bys, and then, of course, locating and closing on shooters when those situations arise. It's going to be a process. I don't expect it to look perfect in this game, but it was pretty bad at times against UConn. It was bad at times against Bowling Green. So it's got to get better. Jeremy Fears, I think, has looked the way I expected him to defensively. I think Cohen Carr has been solid. I think he's got another gear to get to. It's really that 2 spot, which is where we knew there were going to be issues. And so, as we talked about coming out of the UConn game, and Izzo has done nothing to quell this talk since then, there's an opportunity for Jordan Scott. If Tang and Fort are not getting better at that end, I've already seen enough to tell, Jordan Scott is ahead of the game defensively. His length plays, his effort level plays. He's not going to be perfect, but there's an opportunity for him if we don't see changes on the defensive end from those two veterans. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I think we didn't talk about it last game with the either before or after the Connecticut game, but I think it's important to point out too that last summer Michigan State played in Spain for 5 games.
Absolutely.
And that made a huge difference when they're just more polished coming into the season. And I think I actually forgot about that, but you could definitely tell that they are just not as connected as they were last year. And I think, especially there's so many more new faces, I think, this year than even last year. So that's really started to show. And so it's going to be, I think, a little bit more of a learning curve for this team to take a couple games, which we didn't really need that last season.
Yeah, but it's funny you mentioned that. I talked a lot about that coming into last season, that, typically when you have an overseas trip, you benefit from that in November. Remember, Michigan State didn't start off great last year.
That's true.
Kansas game was not good. They didn't play. I mean, they get blown out, but they didn't play well. If you had played that game a month later, MSU wins, or any time after that. They were a better team than Kansas, but they did not look like that day. It really took them, I think, until I think the North Carolina game in Maui was where you started to see it turn. And then it just never stopped. But it took them a few weeks. I would agree with you, though, that in general, that is a big advantage. I think you might have mentioned on the Spartan Mag board, I didn't realize it. Did UConn go on a trip this year?
They were right? Yeah, they went to Italy. They were in Italy for 5 games.
It explains a lot. It really does. Why they looked just more together. And that, again, that's another reason why it's not unfair to say that you could expect it to be a process for Michigan State. I don't expect them to be great in terms of defensive connectedness on Monday night. I do expect them to be better than they were against UConn and Bowling Green, though.
Yeah.
And to show signs that they're turning the corner. But I think some of that is also going to come once roles get sorted out. Because what that means is guys are proving that they're able to do the things that are necessary to win. And so they might move up in the rotation and somebody else moves down. That takes time to sort out. You need to actually see it happen, right? So, I don't want perfect. I don't expect perfect. I want perfect, I should say, but we're not going to get it. I don't expect it. I do expect improvement. Let's see some signs.
Do you expect the starting lineup to be, now we're recording this on Saturday, and I don't think there's been any announcement that I'm aware of, the starting lineup to be unchanged from what it was in the 2 exhibition games?
I think so. I don't think Tom Izzo is going to make a personnel change based on 2 exhibition games. Now, what we don't know is what's going on in practice. If there has been a steady diet of the same thing in practice over the last week or two, then maybe. But based on what I know, I don't expect it to change yet. I think that, Jim I'll bring up Jim Comparoni again, made a very good point this week. He's absolutely correct. Tom Izzo, one of Tom Izzo's core beliefs always has been guys need to earn their spot, earn their role. If you give players a role without them having to earn it, you are asking for trouble. And Jim likes to cite a couple of, these have been his go-to examples for 2 decades now. Chris Hill and Allen Anderson. Chris Hill especially had a lot of success early in his career shooting the ball, right? Everybody remembers great 3-point shooter. And MSU actually needed him to play some point guard. He wasn't ever really a point guard, but they had to play him there. And he played a lot from immediately because MSU was kind of down numbers for a variety of reasons his freshman year. And they didn't have any other options. And it's Jim's belief, and I have to believe it's Izzo's belief, and that's where Jim gets it from, that didn't do Chris any favors. His career it was a solid career, but it didn't go the way people thought it might after his freshman year. And part of that, the belief is that he was because he wasn't able to be held accountable early, he never made the improvements necessary on the defensive end to go to the next level. Alan Anderson finally got it his senior year, but it took him several years. Same deal, same class as Chris Hill. They had to play him. And so I think that's the deal. They're not going to, Trey Fort is a totally different scenario in the sense that he's a one-year guy. They've got to get done with him what you would normally take 3 years to do in a few weeks.
Right.
That's a hard task. But I think at a minimum, Tom Izzo's not going to just hand him the starting spot. He wants to give Trey Fort the best chance to be the guy they need him to be in all ways, not just with the ball in his hands, this season. And so I think because of that, they're going to want to wait until Trey does enough good things on the defensive end that they can feel like he will feel he's earned it. And he understands, well, I'm getting this increased role. I'm starting now because of what I'm doing defensively. That's a perfect world. What ends up happening, don't know. But, that's another reason I go back to Jordan Scott. That's another reason why Jordan Scott, if he keeps doing the right things, he's going to play.
Yeah, right.
He will take somebody else's minutes if he continues doing what he did in that second half at UConn. Guaranteed.
Yeah, and I've seen a number of people who mention, well, you need to play your best player right now, even though, but I think,
that's not Tom Izzo's MO.
Exactly. Well,
never has been.
And you have to think about it too, from Tom Izzo's standpoint, he's playing, right. I mean, you're coaching now, obviously you want to win every game right now, but he is also coaching for March.
Absolutely.
Right? And so
that's what we're
you
talking
want to have,
about.
Right. I know, but people just don't think about that sometimes, that you want the best version of everybody when it comes March. And so if it means you sacrifice a little bit right now and maybe get more struggles on the offensive end or wherever, it's worth it because the dividend pays off in March. I mean, that's the formula, right, for success.
If Trey Fort is allowed to make mistakes with impunity now, what good reason is there to believe that by February he's not still making those mistakes?
Right.
It's a simple thing. I understand there are different philosophies on this, and there are coaches who believe in the let them play through it.
Yeah, figure out your mistakes and then correct them. Yeah.
Not, if you look at the majority of the elite coaches over the history of college basketball, you will find the vast, vast majority of them taught with playing time. Tom Izzo is not an outlier.
Yeah.
He's very much in the mainstream of that. Just because there are guys who believe accountability is an old-fashioned thing, don't believe it. And regardless, you can believe it, but you know what? It's not going to change what Tom Izzo does.
Well, there's
so get
that
ready.
Too. Yeah. Well, I think wasn't it Bobby Knight who said the best teacher was the bench? I think.
Yes. And that's what I mean. And if you think like even guys like, don't think that Dean Smith just let guys go out there and make mistakes with impunity, or John Wooden. To all these guys, yes,
yeah,
that's how it works.
And to your point too, there's sometimes you just don't have a choice, and then you're sacrificing something later for what you could.
That's Tom Izzo's belief, is that with some individual players and teams in certain situations. He was in a spot where I'll give you another example. We talked about older guys, but I'll give you another example. I think Nick Ward's another example. I think Nick Ward, they had to play him because of injuries to post players his freshman year. They could not afford to take him off the floor because they had no other size. Gavin Schilling was out. Ben Carter was out. They had no size besides him. So he played a lot, and he put up good rebounding numbers. He was fun to watch in the low post, but you know what Nick Ward never fully got? How to play Michigan State big man defense. And it cost him. And by the end of his junior year, he was coming off the bench because Xavier Tillman, who did learn those lessons, was able to be held accountable, became an all-around player the way Michigan State needed him to be. Yeah, and he supplanted Nick Ward. There's lots of examples of it.
Yeah, and it's funny because you'll have those people who say, "Well, you want someone who could score low post and all this stuff," and obviously you do, but not having that defensive end figured out just shows. I mean, when you look at the comparison of the team with Xavier Tillman starting versus Nick Ward, they were a much better team with Xavier Tillman, even though he never had the post game that Nick Ward did. Probably still doesn't, but
right.
he did everything else so much better, especially on the defensive end, that it made a huge difference.
I think it's true for the most part across basketball, though certainly there are programs where Nick Ward would have continued to play ahead of Xavier Tillman. That's true. But at Michigan State, it always starts on the defensive end. It always does. And if you are looking for what will decide roles between two guys, you would be well advised to focus on what they do on the defensive end, and that will be the tell. 99 times out of 100, that will be the tell at a program like Michigan State. So that's what I believe about the 2 spot. I think they believe that, if I had to guess and reading between the lines of things people have said, I think Trey Fort obviously has the physical tools to do it. There's no question about his strength, his athletic ability. That's a great place to start from. But he's been in 5 different systems, some of which totally disengaged from what Michigan State emphasizes on defense. Right. As recently as last year, the system he played in couldn't be further apart from Michigan State in terms of the principles. So I think if I had to guess, I would assume they feel like, hey, if we can somehow get Trey, he doesn't have to be a stopper. He's not going to be Jaden Akins, but can we get him to be functional? With his athletic ability, he can get there if we do everything we can, pour everything we can into getting the mental aspect of it where it needs to be. And I think that's how they're seeing it, because they know that happening gives this team the best chance to reach its potential, whatever that is, come March. And you're absolutely right. It is always the long game at Michigan State. Tom Izzo is not playing to win games in November. He wants to win. I'm not saying he shrugs it off, but that is not the ultimate goal. He has an end product in mind, and sometimes it takes a month or two to get there. And I think this might be one of those situations, that 2 spot. So I'm going to be surprised if we see a change in the starting lineup at the 2, but you never know.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. Again, make sure you check us out live after the game, and I have to get back from the game, so it won't be right after. It'll be usually an hour or so after the game. So check us out. Join us on YouTube, on X, or on Instagram. Please feel free to comment, and we sort of bring you into the show as we talk about the game against Colgate. Hopefully, Michigan State comes down with the win, and hopefully you've had a chance to recover from the Halloween, and you've had recovering from your candy coma. I didn't have any trick-or-treaters last night, since we're a place where there's not any trick-or-treaters. I know you just moved recently. Do you have a lot of trick-or-treaters in your neighborhood?
We had a lot. I was not here for it. My wife took care of it. I was attending my first Hollow Wicked with Insane Clown Posse performing at the Masonic Theater, and it was unbelievable. Unbelievable. So I had a very different Halloween. But yeah, it's busy. It's busy here. She had to shut it down a little early. Ran out of candy.
Yeah, so at some point you just have to. Yeah, you're giving out random granola bars and stuff. It's like, all right,
exactly. Searching for some potato chips and pretzels. Yeah.
All right, so we'll leave it there. So until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go Green.